What if everybody is gone before pick 12? We'll tell you what the worst case scenario could be for the Cowboys next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we're going to talk about the worst case scenario for the Cowboys at pick 12 and pick 20. We're also going to do a news update because the Cowboys signed yet another cornerback with short arms on Tuesday. But Landon, I want to talk to you about a question that I posed to some of our listeners on Tuesday morning, because I've been doing these mock drafts, just like we've all been doing them. And there's been a couple different times where all of the guys that we like are off the board. And in this mock draft that I did, Arvell Reese, David Bailey, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, Carnell Tate, Jeremyiah Love, Mansour Dillon, Francis Mauigoa, Ruben Bain, and Mekhi Lemon were all off the board. And I think for a lot of people, that's like the worst case scenario for a couple of reasons. Number one, all of your targets are gone. Number two, the two receivers, Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon, are both off the board as well. So he doesn't even give you like this premier guy to trade away from. In this kind of scenario where you get wiped out at 12, who are you picking?
I mean, first of all, I think I don't think that this is a wipeout situation to me, because I have no problem taking Aveion Terrell here at 12. Like, I think that if you feel that's how I feel about 12 and 20 right now, is that you've got so many needs that like it's going to be hard for them to run out of everything that you possibly could need. And I know some people will get upset and they'll say, well, you're reaching here, but honestly, you're not. All of these players after a certain level are all kind of on the same plane, right? All these red chip guys that you would take in the first round. I think that there's, once you get down to 20, there's some guys that you could reach beyond that kind of realm potentially that you could reach for, but I don't think it's going to be necessary, because 20 is going to be an even better situation for you. For me, I just think that I've run a bunch of these situations, and as someone who's okay with taking Aveion Terrell, just like I would be okay with taking CJ Allen at 20, like I wouldn't feel great about it. I would be okay with it though. I just haven't found too many situations where I feel truly wiped out at 12. There's definitely more times when I've had to, just be okay with my pick at 12 than at 20. But there's been very few times where I've truly felt like, man, there's no trade back options. There's no pick I'd take. I don't know what to do here.
So let's go through some of the names, because you mentioned Aveion Terrell. Like, that to me, I think you and I both like him maybe more than the consensus does. And I think we like him a lot because if the Cowboys are going to be okay with small cornerbacks,
clearly they are.
Clearly they are. They've acquired two of the shortest ones they've ever acquired under Will McClay. Then I think Terrell makes a lot of sense. You can play him in the outside. I think you can play him in the slot if needed. He makes a ton of plays on the ball. He got better every single year that he was at Clemson. He's got the NFL bloodlines. I mean, I could go on and on. And yeah, maybe you want him at 16, but the closer that we get to the draft, I think it's a pipe dream to think he'll be there at 20. And if he's a pick at 12, maybe you're not getting supreme value, but I do think you're getting a good player.
Yeah, I look. Sometimes supreme value is not an option. I do feel like there is like a sentiment going around right now that if you're in this situation, then man, you just got to pick an offensive player. You just I just don't believe that anyone outside of Jeremyiah Love is a tier or even anywhere more than, if you want to break it down by picks, 5 or 6 picks away from any of these defensive players. So,
let's again, in this mock draft that I did, Jeremyiah Love was gone inside the top 5. So your top offensive players available are Vega, the Penn State guard. You're not taking a guard at 12 after spending 2 first-round picks.
that would be wild if they did. Go ahead.
Spencer Fano, who is probably a guard, right?
Or a center. Maybe.
Yeah, or a center. And then the next highest one is Kenyon Sadiq. Now, of those three guys, Sadiq is the most intriguing for me, but I don't know if I want to spend another pick on a pass catcher considering all the resources they've already handed out, which is why to me it's Terrell. But the other name that we should mention is Dillon Thieneman, who we've liked for a long time. I think there was at one point we were hoping and praying that he would be the pick at 20. As we get further along in the process, it doesn't seem like he's going to make it that far. And at 12, I think it's the same thing as Terrell. It's not quite the positional value that you want, but I think he's a strong scheme fit with Christian Parker. He can play a lot of different roles. He has 3 years of production. He's a supreme athlete. It feels like a pretty safe pick to me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in a lot of these drafts that I'm doing, especially on the PFF one, there's times when he's getting taken before the Cowboys even pick at 12, and I think that that's a clear reach, but I mean, the fact is it's in the range of outcomes at this point.
And if he does, that's not necessarily a bad thing for Dallas either, as that likely means that Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles is going to be available to you at 12.
Mosher and Landon is usually available
Correct.
yeah, I mean, I do think that like there should be choices. Like there are guys that, again, that you may not love at 12, but you're not going to love taking an offensive player at 12 either, So I think there's something to be said. Someone used the term impact value. And I think that impact value is something that especially this year when you have like a huge plateau of players and not a ton of blue chip players, I think you have to look even beyond positional value at time and realize what the impact value of your team is going to be. And having a tied into pass catcher who, you're going to have to work into the offense, basically in the part of the area of the field where you like to work CD Lamb most of the time, is probably not going to have the same impact as the guy who will probably walk in here as a starter at cornerback. So it's just something to consider.
So for us, we love Terrell. We love Thieneman. We would be happy with either of those guys at 12. How would you rank those for you personally? Just quickly before we move on here.
Terrell, is it Terrell, Thieneman, and who's the third person?
Just those two. Just those two. Those are your worst case scenarios.
I think at this point, it's probably Terrell, Thieneman because of positional value.
Now, the other names that were mentioned, again, on X, when I posed this question, 3 guys that were the most common answers. Jeremiah McCoy, Hakeem Mesidor, Keldrick Falk. 2 of those guys are injured. One of those guys has a lot of developing to do. Those guys, to me, would be a tier down from Thieneman and from Terrell. And I don't know if the Cowboys would draft those guys, at that spot, but I think we should at least mention them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Falk is a guy that especially of those 3, right, that you could convince yourself like, man, there's some upside there. And maybe you could also get a high floor player that is just a useful run defender. But I totally understand not being comfortable with taking him at 12. I view him more as a middle to late round, first round guy.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
Of those 3 names, I would prefer Falk.
Of those 3? Well, I mean, I don't think that's wild. I think, Mesidor has his own set of issues that we've talked about, that it's just a lot of risk. And I think the same goes for McCoy. It's just like you're investing a lot and there's a lot of risk, I think the risk with Falk is that he could be bad, I guess. I have a hard time believing that, I just think there's a chance he may not be great, but I think that it's more likely that he's just a not great player than he's a bad player, and I think
there's a chance he could be like a Dorrance Armstrong level player. And is that worth the 12th pick? No, but I don't think he's going to wash out like Taco Charlton did in Dallas either.
In a year like this, not, the knock on you being not worthy of the 12th round pick, the 12th overall pick, that's a suitable knock on you, right? Because that's just the way the class is this year.
Just to be clear, though, those guys for me are a gap down from Terrell and Thieneman. Yes. And again, that is a worst case scenario. If all those defensive guys go, I think they're going to be okay. Maybe you're not going to get a top 6, top 7 player in the draft. That's okay. I do want to talk about pick number 20, because this is where a lot of people, we're seeing some wide variety of opinions on pick 20. We'll talk about the potential worst case scenario at that spot next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you could put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I've always known the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market that is powered by the people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swap trading involve significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with Landon and I and other listeners of the show. Tap the link in the show notes or go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com. All right, let's talk about pick 20 because at least for me, it just seems like there's so many more options at this pick that I feel like could be of value. And every time I do a mock, maybe I don't love the options at 20, but there's like 10 players that if the Cowboys picked, I would be like, okay, that makes sense. I'm good with it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's always been the case at 20. It's like I just felt like since early days when we started creating our boards and looking at these guys, you just felt like, man, 20 is 12. We just don't know how it's gonna fall. It's really gonna be a crapshoot. But 20 has always just felt like if as long as you're accepting that this class really kind of plateaus from like pick 10 or 8 to the round 3, I think you felt like you get down to 20 and especially if you've run a bunch of these mock simulators, you just feel like you've got a ton of options there, right? Even trade down options at times. So I just feel like the Cowboys are kind of in a sweet spot right now with that 20th pick. And honestly, I that's why I keep thinking that the Cowboys have opportunities to trade with teams that are looking to kind of like have the Cowboys split. So if just like we talked about with a couple of those exercises a few weeks ago where they would go up with Arizona or up to Cleveland and they would, trade back with their 20th pick. Cause I think that is the kind of range that a lot of teams want to be picking in because that's a sweet spot for a whole bunch of value of really good players at a really nice price.
Ultimately, I think my ideal thing is here, if they could drop down 10 spots, maybe you take 80 cents on the dollar in the trade. Maybe it's only a 3rd round pick. Maybe it's only a 4th round pick. There's just not a huge tier gap in terms of talent for me, but there is going to be, for some team, there's going to be a receiver available that they love. There's going to be an offensive tackle they feel like is the last of a tier. I promise you there's going to be trade offers. It's just whether the Cowboys want to lose a trade to pick up an extra pick. But what I wanted to do is run through some names. And you just tell me if you would be okay with them at 20. Like, now I'm not saying feel great, but just would be okay for them. This is based on the Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator. Let's run through it. CJ Allen, Georgia.
Yeah, like we talked about, I would be okay with that.
Emmanuel McNeil Warren, safety from Toledo.
Definitely.
A++. Keldrick Falk.
Yes, I think that's great value for Keldrick Falk.
Cassius Hell.
Yes, I would take Cassius Hell.
Again, for me, that's an A+ pick. I love Hal. I love Emmanuel McNeil Warren. They draft either of those guys, we're having a party.
Yep.
Caden McDonald.
Absolutely. If they can figure that out, I mean, I think he's so good that I think he would be an impact player on this defense. That's why I try whenever I get extra picks, I usually end up picking him at 20 if I get a chance.
And now it makes more sense that Oso Digizua is gone, right? Like now you can have this guy be your true nose tackle. And maybe the idea is like long-term, Kenny Clark's not on this team, like after the 2026 season. And it's McDonald and Quinnen Williams are your primary tackles. And they make a lot of sense together. Let's keep going. Yeah. TJ Parker from Clemson.
Yeah, I'd be okay with Parker at 20.
Peter Woods.
I mean, again, if we're going with okay,
Okay.
Yes, I would be okay with Peter Woods at 20.
Colton Hood.
Yes, I'd be okay with Colton Hood.
Jacob Rodriguez.
Yes, I'd be okay with Jacob Rodriguez because I like him a lot, and I think that man, it's going to take a lot for me to draft a linebacker in the first round, but I would be okay with that. I guess.
Malachi Lawrence.
Yes, I'd be okay with
R. Mason Thomas.
That's right on the border for me.
So that's the first name for me that I'm like, eh. Now there's a couple in there that I don't love, and I'll give you an example. I'm not the biggest Colton Hood fan.
Sure,
but is that a like a big reach? No, you're taking a athletic cornerback who's just turned 21 years old. Like, fine, I totally get it.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I feel too. That's why I like a lot of these guys, is because they're edges and corners, right? And so it's easier for me to kind of justify, like, yeah, they're pretty. I mean, again, in a year where we have to understand what we're the draft class that we're drafting in. Yeah, I would take, like we said, a majority of these guys, especially the ones that play, the money 5 positions.
I didn't even give you the hard ones. I skipped a couple of ones for you, like Caleb Banks, Akeem Mesidor. I mean, again, there's a lot of people that absolutely love Akeem Mesidor, would be fine with him at 12. I'm not in that camp. I'm not sure where you're at, but how would you feel about him at 20?
At 20, I would take him. I would take him at 20.
Okay. I think the point is that they're going to be okay. Now, is there a chance that we come out of round 1 and the draft is, let's say it's Dillon, Thieneman, and CJ Allen? Those are 2 good players, but not at premium positions. I think we'd feel like, okay, you got good players. Maybe it's not the home run draft, like the franchise changing draft that we're hoping for, but I don't think it's a bad draft either.
Yeah, I mean, again, we were looking for some top end talent just to kind of top off. Like they've worked the middle class a little bit. We wanted to see them kind of work the top end of the defensive roster. If they don't get that opportunity and they just get 2 really solid players coming out of the draft, it's unfortunate, but it certainly isn't the end of the world.
Here's how I think it could be really bad for Dallas. Is that if they feel like, hey, we've got to take an edge at 12, and let's say it's Mesidor. And again, I know there are people that like Mesidor more than me. And then at 20, you feel like, hey, we've got to grab a linebacker, and CJ Allen goes to Tampa Bay at 15 because they just lost Levante David. And now you're taking the 3rd linebacker, really the 4th linebacker at pick 20 in this class. That's where it'd feel like, okay, you're getting good players, but you're not really getting difference-making players, and you're having to draft the 3rd, 4th, 5th best player at a position when you've got 2 top 20 picks.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing the pick at 20 is going to be so good. And there, like I said, there's going to be so many players at money 5 positions.
I feel okay about that.
I feel like it's not a reach. Like either they were going to really like CJ Allen and take him at 20. They'll really like him.
What if it's like Anthony Hill?
Then I think it's a preference. And again, I think that I would be okay with the Cowboys obtaining Anthony Hill with the 20th pick. My argument against would be, I feel like because he's specifically valuable to what the Cowboys are doing, that you could get him at a discount. You wouldn't need to spend the 20th overall pick on. But if that's the pick and you don't have another pick until 94 and you don't think he makes it to 94, even though I think he probably could make it to 94, I guess I would understand them, in a class like this, getting the player that they like.
All right, let's talk about some news updates for the Cowboys, including a cornerback that they signed on Tuesday. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is always a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy and reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference, and that's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. And they've got over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. So for a limited time only, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box with free shipping and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box with free shipping and free dessert for life. You must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Landon, the Cowboys signed a new cornerback on Tuesday to add to the already somewhat deep cornerback room.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about their new signing?
Yeah, Derion Kendrick, he was, this is something we should talk about, right? He's another Georgia Bulldog, right? It does feel like they are targeting these folks because this clearly is going to be a system that's very similar to what Georgia runs, right? So I don't think that's the only reason they signed it, but I do think that there's some symbiosis there. And I'm also wondering, I need to go back and watch more Rams and Shula stuff on the Rams defense, because I wonder if there's some crossover there now that we've got two of their corners. But another kind of guy, he's 6 foot 190, which is close to what the Cowboys are looking for. But yeah, another guy with shorter arms, which is not necessarily typically what the Cowboys have been looking for. Clearly, the profile here has changed. This is a guy who played with the Rams and the Seahawks last year. I think he initially got cut off the Rams at cut down. The Seahawks picked him up. I watched, I think, all or at least half his snaps from 2025, and he seemed to be moving well. He got really incredible grades a couple of games for PFF, but didn't play a ton. I think he played something like 125 snaps all of last year. So I think this is just a veteran depth guy that can provide some snaps for you. Just in case, you've got a couple of different guys that are shown to be a little bit injury prone. So maybe having guys like this on your roster probably isn't the worst idea at this point.
He's slow, and that's the reason why he's always going to be available. He is really, really slow. I think he ran a 4.7 something at his pro day. So he's always going to be limited, and he's an outside cornerback, but he's a zone heavy corner that generally tackles pretty well. But when you get him into these games where he's got to track the ball down the field, he just doesn't have the long speed. But what I think is more interesting, more than anything else, is that he's got 31-inch arms. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's fascinating is that Will McClay, since joining the team in 2015 as the director of player personnel, has drafted exactly one cornerback with sub 31-inch arms, and that's Chidobe Awuzie in 2017. Okay. This offseason, he has now signed two guys with less than average arm length in Kobe Durant and now with Kendrick. That's just unheard of for him. Like, it's clearly something that he does not believe in. And I'm not saying that Christian Parker likes cornerbacks with short arms, but I think he likes certain types of corners. And now I do think that opens up the Cowboys to possibly drafting a guy like Aveion Terrell or Mansour Delane, where I think in previous years, they would have crossed those guys right off their board.
I also would submit that, we've all just kind of universally attributed this to Will McClay, but maybe we shouldn't, because ultimately Will McClay and the thing that we hear about what Will McClay does better than anybody else, or what he even says he thinks he does better than anybody else, is be a glue between the coaching staff and the scouting department, right? Like, that's
the only thing is they've had how many different defensive coaches in there.
Well, is that causality or correlation? Because the truth is maybe they've kept on hiring these defensive coordinators that match the personnel that they've had year after year after year. So
it's possible.
I also think that it doesn't hurt that period of time also stretched over the same period of time in which cover 3 and cover 1 silo defenses were dominant in the NFL, right?
In vogue, right?
So as we shift away from it, maybe this is McClay evolving with his new coaching staff a little bit. And really the change here is that the Cowboys are truly changing their defense in a way that, like, at least from schematically, from what they've done, this has really been sort of different flavors of the same sort of four down, structure, basic under fronts, like cover 1 and cover 3 dominant. And we're going to see a lot of that still, but maybe you just don't lean into those coverages the way that you have been previously, and it doesn't require a very specialized type of cornerback anymore.
The Kendrick signing is going to have no impact on them in the draft.
Probably
I mean, this
not.
is a depth signing.
Yeah.
But what I do wonder, like, is he a guy that could potentially replace like a Kalen Carson, who is really like a man-to-man outside cornerback who, I mean, we really just haven't seen a lot of over the last 2 years. Maybe this is a guy that's now like your 4th cornerback, Kobe Durant. You've got Kobe Durant, you've got Deron Bland, you've got Savon Ravel, and it's Kendrick fighting for that 4th cornerback spot as we go into the draft. I don't know.
Well, look, I mean, here's the truth of the matter is that you're still worried about adding talent to the top of this defense. And while you're trying to angle at that, I think the way you have to compensate is that, man, we've also got to have the best cornerback forward in the NFL because you just need, like, you need to find the talent somehow to cobble together to make up for the fact that you may not have it at the top end. So you're obviously hoping that Ravel develops. You're obviously hoping that Bland comes back. You hope that maybe you could draft another guy or get some more talent in the draft. But if you can't, churning that talent at the bottom of the roster, part of the roster that's going to make the team, that and just getting more competition there is always just going to be a good thing.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Cowboys ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and so much more. Head over to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.